1. When I was around 15 years old, I was very active on many Facebook art groups. Where I live, everyone uses it, don't shame me. And I got to meet many people online who were often my age and ended up making lots of friends. They were never from my city, though, not even from my own country. So when I finally found someone from my city, I got kind of excited. This dude told me he was my age. Spoilers, he wasn't. He was at least 18 at that moment. And, like the dumb kid I was, I believed him. We talked for 2 months, and I think he seemed chill. At least until he started to ask for personal info and pictures of me. And let me tell you, I may be an idiot, but I'm not stupid and never sent anything. My Facebook profile didn't have any, but sadly, my mom did have some pics of me, and I tend to stand out because I'm very tall and have recognizable features. Now, before continuing, I want to address the title of this story. Why Ronald McDonald? Well, he was very obsessed with Ronald McDonald. He had pictures of him everywhere and would share mostly old photos of the suit. But at the time I thought it was a joke or a weird aesthetic, and since I've always loved creepy photos, I didn't think much of it. At least until he started to show his clear devotion to the clown. He would say things like Donald was his hero, and he wanted to meet him, something that wasn't probable, since we don't have McDonald's in my country. In his mission to get to know me, he asked if I was interested in someone, and I said no. Then proceeded to ask me if I wanted to be his girlfriend. I, of course, said no. He kept insisting, so I lied and said I wasn't interested in anyone because I already had a girlfriend. I'm bi, and I was very open about it online at that time. He quickly switched from be my girlfriend to you're a sinner. And that's when I knew this dude was religious and homophobic as fuck. He even asked me if my dad or any man had done something to me for me to like girls more. That's where I decided to fuck off and block him everywhere I could. He tried to contact me from different accounts, but the way he writes is very distinct, so I blocked them too. He would be everywhere. I would join a group for artists only, and he would pop up out of nowhere. He didn't do art. If I left the group, he would leave too. I would go to conventions with my cousin, and he would be there. I knew how he looked because he did send me pics. I tried to pass it as a weird coincidence, but he didn't even like anime or anything about the convention, so it was really weird. This went on for a good couple of years, and I somehow managed to avoid a physical encounter every time. I'm guessing he could keep track of me because I was, and still am, very active in my city's art community. I never post about personal life or my face, but the times I did say something like going to X place to help, he would be there. Fast forward some years, and I'm attending to an art-related class. One weird dude is my classmate, and I say he's weird because he would ship me with my friend who is also in class. Would ask very not safe for work questions of us like, were we a couple? We were both minors, and he was 23, so I tried to keep distance. One day, the McDonald guy comes to the building. I obviously fast-walked to the other side of the building, but apparently he was looking for the other dude, and of course, they were friends. It seemed that the weird dude would talk about me and my friend with the Donald guy, who clearly knew who I was and was still trying to get to me. The classes always ended quite late, and I had to wait for my mom to pick me up. I'm very calm and quite strong, so I didn't fear being robbed, because I'd already been in that situation and I know how to deal with it. But the knowledge of the Donald guy, knowing where I was 3 days of the week, late at night, gave me chills. I know I don't describe him like a dangerous guy, but he's been keeping an eye on me since 2016. I was still a kid, and I swear to Sky Daddy I saw him walking on the street one night my mom was late. She was always late, but this time was at least 1 hour late. And I ran into a sandwich store that was in the opposite direction because it looked like he was approaching me. I finished the classes and worked there for a little project. No more than a few days, but guess what? He was there. He didn't enter the building, but I could see him walking outside. Thankfully, those days my boss did let me stay inside until my mom arrived, so I felt more calm. I see him around the internet from time to time, and I make sure to block him. At least, I'm sure he doesn't know where I live because I moved recently, so that's a little comforting. So yeah, there's a weird Christian dude obsessed with Ronald McDonald who has been keeping an eye on me for at least 5 years now. 2. This happened about 4 years ago. I was 20 at the time. The first time I met the guy who would become my grocery store stalker, he was standing outside the store collecting money for the Salvation Army Christmas-time donations. I'm a fairly friendly person, so I like to say hi to people who work at places I frequent to be nice. This guy was a kid around my age, very tall, with a mild resemblance to Lurch from the Addams Family. Dark circles under dark eyes, short black hair, kind of vacant look in the eyes. I chatted with him for maybe 2 minutes, just idle chit-chat about the weather and whatnot. Nothing particularly memorable or interesting, and then waved goodbye and went home. Little did I know that single moment would be the start of something that would have me genuinely afraid. About 4 or 5 months passed, and I hadn't seen him again. Then one day, as I was grocery shopping with a friend, as we were chatting, she suddenly got really quiet and kind of recoiled backwards, looking behind me. I turned around to see this guy, who had to be at least 6'4", towering over me not 8 inches from my body. He said hi and told me he remembered me from that December I had talked to him, and then asked for my number. I, being young and never having experienced this type of interaction before, told him I didn't have my number memorized, and that I would write his down and text him later. I kind of half-waved my phone at him, pointing at my at-the-time boyfriend's picture, who was my wallpaper, making a point to say, "Oh look, that's my boyfriend," to the guy hoping he would clue in, but no luck. He told me his number, which immediately upon getting I blocked, without letting him get my phone number. However, what really made my blood run cold was what he said after I put my phone away. He leaned in real close, and in a low voice he told me, "Whatever I text you is for your eyes only." At this point, I started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. I said, "Yeah, sure, nice talking to you, but we gotta get back to shopping." And I grabbed my friend and dragged her off, shooting a panicked look at her, and asking why she didn't bail me out. Apparently he scared her too with his getting so close to me, and she didn't know what to do. I want to make it clear, I'm not exactly a small girl at 5'8" and solidly built. I can certainly handle myself, and I very rarely feel intimidated or small in the presence of anyone, male or female. But this guy made me feel tiny and scared. In the months that would follow, he would make me feel truly frightened. I had hoped that creepy interaction would be the last time I saw him, but that was unfortunately not the case. After that initial meeting with him, saying that creepy thing about his text being for my eyes only, it seemed like I would run into him every single time I got to the store, no matter what checkout lane I was in. He always seemed to appear at the end of it, when I was finished shopping, and every time I was in the store I would notice him out of the corner of my eye watching me, no matter what area I was in. One time I even caught him following me out to my car. At that point I got scared, and decided to say something to the managers. After letting the managers know what was going on, they assured me they would not let him talk to me anymore. After that, he wouldn't speak to me, but I would continue to see him following me around the store at a distance every time that I went there. It got so bad that I started to be afraid to go to the store at all. But I am one of those stubborn people who refuses to be intimidated by someone to the point where I'll stop doing something. I had hoped that maybe it was a coincidence that he was following me. After all, it was a big store, and maybe he just had things to do that just happened to be in the areas I was shopping in. So I started to pay close attention to my surroundings. Once I started paying really close attention, I realized that every time I was up there, I would constantly notice him in the areas of the store I was in. During my last encounter with him, I went up to the store to just grab 2 or 3 items I needed for dinner that night, and I first saw him standing outside the store when I got there, and with his back to me I quickly ran inside. hoping he didn't see me. Unfortunately, after a few minutes, I saw him at the very back of the store and items in hand. I immediately made a beeline towards the front. As soon as I got near the checkout, I ducked behind one of the shelf displays and watched carefully at the front of the store to see if CC would appear. And he did. I watched as he looked up and down the checkout, and when he didn't see me there, I saw him step outside. At this point, I quickly ran to the nearest open cashier, rang up my items, and stuck my head out the door to look for him. I didn't see him there immediately, so I started trying to make my way back to where I was parked. I had parked a ways away, near the side of the store, where a bunch of other small stores and restaurants were lined up. And as I was walking towards my car, I realized I saw him standing by the entrance that I had first entered the store through, and ducked behind a pillar immediately, hoping he didn't see me. I watched carefully from behind the pillar, and as he scanned the parking lot, he obviously couldn't find me. After a minute or two, he started to walk out towards the direction of the parking lot in front of the store, and so I took that opportunity to make a run for it to my car, as soon as he was far enough away that I felt safe. As soon as I got into my car, I locked the doors, and to my horror when I looked up, he was standing there about 15 feet from my car with a shopping cart in front of him. I knew he followed me, he knew that I knew. I fully believe he had chased after me, and when I made it to my car, he grabbed the nearest cart to make it look like he was collecting them from the parking lot. I remember just feeling absolutely terrified at that moment. I went home and immediately told my grandfather what had happened. I began crying and shaking, and my grandfather told me to get in the car. We were going to settle this. He and I drove up to the store in his car, and he walked me into the store and demanded we spoke with the managers immediately, both of them. When the managers arrived at customer service, he asked me to tell them what had been happening, and demanded that they ensure he left me alone or that he would involve the police. The managers swore up and down that they would take care of it. As far as I know, he wasn't fired immediately, because my friend who first encountered him with me when this whole thing began told me that she would see him from time to time when she was there by herself, but that any time I went with her, she would never see him. I fully believe he knew whenever I was there, only this time, instead of stalking me, he avoided me. Eventually, everyone who knew the situation stopped seeing him there, so I think he may have gotten fired or moved on from that store. Either way, I haven't had any issues since, but I have never in my life felt so afraid of another human being as I did that day, seeing him make eye contact with me in the parking lot as I locked my car doors. It still creeps me out to think he was watching me so closely every time I entered the store that he could so easily avoid or follow me whenever he wanted. 3. Just to give some context, I'm currently in the UK, and the town where I live is known for its drug scene, but it doesn't have a violent crime problem to speak of. I think that's why I find what happened so shocking, because I lived in London before, and while some messed up stuff did happen to me there, it was nowhere near on the level of what happened to me earlier this year. My partner and I lived together in our flat, which was in a relatively busy residential area. I work from home, however, and he's out of the flat quite a lot, so I guess it might look to an outsider like I live alone. Our flat complex was once an old factory, and we have these huge industrial windows, so people walking on the street have a pretty clear view of our dining room, which is where I work during the day. It all started in July of this year. I'm ashamed to say that I can be a major rubbernecker, and a lot of drama occurs on the road outside of our flat, so I look out of the windows often during my workday for some light entertainment. The best was a 2-hour breakup I got to watch unfold in the car just below our window. But that's beside the point. One day, I got up to make myself a cup of tea. I looked out the kitchen window and saw this guy just staring at me. I was struck by how intense it was and how he didn't look away. Even when it was obvious I was looking back at him. I felt creeped out by it, but I tried not to let it bother me. We have a lot of drug addicts and other weird characters that hang out around here, so it didn't seem like such a big deal. I went back to work, and by the time I'd sat down at the table, he was gone. About a week later, my partner had gone to visit his dad for the weekend, so I was excited to hunker down and catch up on some of my favorite shows alone. After about 30 minutes, the buzzer to the flat went. The buzzer is so loud, and it scared the heck out of me. I was lucky my popcorn didn't go flying out of my hands. Now, our flat complex has this big porch where teenagers and addicts love to hang out, because it provides shelter from the rain, and about 4 people can sit down inside of it. Sometimes people lean on the buzzers by accident when they're hanging out in the porch, so I assumed that was what happened. After a few seconds, however, the buzzer went again and again and again. Someone was pressing it in this rhythmic pattern. It's something I know my partner does when he's forgotten his keys, and it's kind of our code for me to let him in, which is why I found it so disconcerting. At first, I was worried he might have missed the bus to his dad's house and had decided to come back to the flat. I was nearly about to buzz him straight in, when I thought it would be a good idea to pick up the phone first and check who it was. As soon as I picked up the phone, the person standing near the intercom must have heard, because they said, "Hello?" It was definitely not my partner. I asked who it was and why they were buzzing the flat so late at night, but all they said was, "Can you let me in?" I asked them why they wanted to come in, and they said, "You invited me, remember?" While they were talking, they kept kind of laughing under their breath, and the whole exchange put me on edge. I told them I had no idea who they were and just hung up. I was half expecting them to start pressing the buzzer again, but they didn't. After a few minutes, I crept out of the flat to have a look at who was in the porch, but they were long gone. My partner has to get up early for work, whereas I'm more of a night owl. Most nights, I'm up until around 2 or 3 a.m., working on my laptop while he's asleep. A few nights after the intercom incident, I was on my laptop watching YouTube videos, and I realized that we'd forgotten to take the trash out. This happens a lot, and it's not uncommon for me to take the trash out at 1 or 2 a.m. At least it wasn't until this happened. I put my slippers on, grabbed the bag of trash, and took it out to the curb outside the flat's main entrance. When I looked across the street, there was this guy standing on the opposite street corner. He was watching me, and his eyes followed me all the way from the front door to the curb. I noticed he was smoking, so I assumed he lived in one of the houses across the street. I remember even thinking, wouldn't it be creepy if he tried to come over here? As I put the trash bag down, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw him walking in a straight line across the road towards me, with his eyes fixed on me the entire time. I don't know how to describe it, but the look on his face filled me with this instinctive sense of dread. It felt like someone had just turned my stomach inside out. I pulled my keys out of my hoodie pocket, turned around, and ran to the front door. I've never felt that kind of fear before, and it was like my body was compelling me to get as far away from this man as possible. I got into the building, slammed the door behind me, and rushed to my flat without looking back. I didn't want to know whether he'd follow me or not. I told my partner about the whole thing the next day and how shook up I was. We agreed that we'd be more proactive with the trash, and I've never taken it out late at night again. Fast forward to the beginning of August, about 2 weeks after the trash incident, and I'd pretty much forgotten about all of it. I was still too scared to go out late at night on the road, but nothing weird had happened since then. I went to bed at about 2 a.m., but I felt restless for some reason, and struggled to get to sleep. By about 3 a.m., I was contemplating whether or not to give up and go do something else, when I heard this scream. The sound cut right through me. There was something visceral about the terror in that scream. I knew it was bad because my partner went from stone cold asleep to being up in a shot. He asked me what it was, and I said I didn't know. I went to the window straight away and looked out. Down one of the side roads near our flat, I could see the headlights, but couldn't get a clear view of the car. The screaming continued in bursts, and after a while I could make out words. It was a woman, and she was saying, get out, over and over again. I'm used to hearing all kinds of domestic arguments take place on the road outside of our flat, particularly since we're near to the university and several popular bars, but this was different. There was this raw fear in her voice that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned to my partner and said I had to call the police. When they picked up and I explained what was happening, they seemed disinterested at first. But the operator's tone changed when I told them where it was. I think they must have been getting calls from all around the area about it. It was sometime during this phone call that I heard a screech of tires and the screaming stopped. The operator asked me to go to the window and describe to them what was happening. When I looked down, there was this black car sat on the road. One of the neighbors from across the road was speaking to the two guys in the car. I had to twist to get a good look at them, but one of the guys in the car looked uncannily like the guy had been watching me while I was putting the trash out that time. At first, the conversation seemed congenial, but it took a turn when the neighbor asked him some sort of question that I couldn't hear clearly, and they sped off down the road. Within no less than 10 minutes, 3 police cars arrived and had blocked off the roads leading to our flat. Our residential area is on a grid system. They were knocking on doors and asking to speak to all of our neighbors. I told my partner that we should go out and speak to them since we saw a lot of what happened, and my partner had the foresight to write down the license plate of the black car. When we went out, there were these 2 girls talking to one of the police officers. They were both shaking, and one of them looked as though she had been crying. I decided to stand nearby and wait for the girls to finish before speaking with the officer myself. What they said made my blood run cold. They were from one of the houses that looked out directly onto the road where I had seen the headlights, so they had a clear view of what happened. Like us, they had been alerted by the screaming and had gone straight to the window. From what they could gather, the black car had cut off a small red car on the road, pulled right in front of it. And that's what caused the girl driving the red car to scream the first time. They thought it might have been some kind of misunderstanding, but then they watched as one of the guys from the black car got out, walked to the red car, and jumped in through the window. That's the point where the girl must have been screaming, "Get out, get out." There had been a struggle, and the girls watching said they assumed the guy was just trying to steal the car, but then he forced the driver into the back seat, and that's when he drove off. The 2 girls were both hysterical by this point, and you could tell they felt guilty for not intervening. I could feel that same guilt seeping into my thoughts as well. After the guy had driven off in the red car, the 2 men in the black car had gone the opposite way and turned the corner onto our road. But they had been stopped by another neighbor. Although this neighbor had been alerted by the screaming, he hadn't actually witnessed what happened, so he had stopped the black car to ask the guys what was going on without knowing they were involved. That was the exchange we saw. When the guys started acting suspicious, he asked them if they would wait for the police to arrive, and that's the point where they drove off. It wasn't until we got back to the flat that I started to put 2 and 2 together. I have a small red car, just like the one the girls had described, and I normally come back at night on that day of the week, since it's the day I go to visit my parents. I had only come back early on this particular occasion because I needed to let a plumber in to do some work on the flat. What if they had been waiting for me and they had gotten the wrong car? Over the next few days, I contacted the police several times and checked the local news, but I never heard anything about the girl who was kidnapped. I still have no idea what happened to her. All I know is that they found her car abandoned somewhere not far from where she was taken, but she wasn't in it. It still gives me chills just thinking about it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories. Episode... where are we? Have we done that many? 537. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Now, before we go on, I would like to give a little shout out to the author of the last story there. My heavens, that was horrifying, wasn't it? Reddit user, Help Creepy Landlady. Thank you kindly, Help Creepy Landlady, for allowing us to use your story. It was greatly appreciated. And you might be noticing that my voice doesn't sound as strong as usual. That's because I'm not very well right now. I have gotten antibiotics off the doctor because a little bit of an issue. Don't know what it is. Don't know if antibiotics are going to make a difference. Waiting on some test results back. I should be able to call on Thursday for those. And hopefully it is just an infection and antibiotics are what'll fix it. Right, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening and take very good care of yourself.